All right, so I've started the recording. Welcome to today's session, and thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be talking about a few ways that might help us reconsider our approaches to AI literacy as a blend of pedagogy and technology rather than an either-or situation. This is just to confirm that indeed I have started the recording. And finally, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge today's sponsor and draw your attention to one of their upcoming future workshops. All right. Now, before I really introduce myself, what I'd really like to do is get a sense of who's here today. I've included a link in the chat a little bit ago, but I'll put it back in. But this is really an opportunity to learn who's joining us. So thank you to those who have already participated in this poll. We'll leave it open for a minute, but wow, this is great. So we have a large number of librarians, instructional designers, higher ed faculty, some students. So quite a nice group. Wow, so many librarians. That's really exciting. Okay, I'll leave that open for a minute, but I'm going to move back to the presentation. Thanks again for participating in that. I should just mention a few things. Certainly feel free to use the chat to engage with one another. I'm not fully able to monitor the chat while I'm talking, so if you have questions that are specifically directed to me, it's probably easier to use the Q&A. And there's also someone from Learning Revolution that will be on hand just in case something should come up in the chat. Okay, so now that I've had a sense of who you are, and I see some of you are introducing yourselves in the chat, which is fantastic, I'm just going to take a moment to introduce myself. My name's Emily Rush, and I'm an instructional designer, and I'm also the team lead for AI development at Rush University. Rush University is a real school that's accredited for health sciences education. It's not my own private college. If for some reason you would like to get in touch with me after this conversation today, this presentation, and you're more than welcome to do so, you can use that handy QR code on the right side of the page to find me on LinkedIn. Just a little bit about me, I guess, to help you understand why I might be discussing this topic today. So I am an experienced university level educator, as well as being an instructional designer. I am by no means an expert in machine learning, but I'm really curious about AI and its transformative impacts on education. And I also play a leadership role in a variety of AI communities of practice. And because of especially my role in AI communities of practice, I'm really interested in collaboration, collective knowledge building, and community resource sharing. All of this is really central to my approach in terms of AI in general and AI literacy as well. Because it's relevant to the topic that I'm discussing, I'm going to take a little bit of time, just a few minutes, to tell you about the university where I work. It, again, as I mentioned, it's called Rush University, just coincidental that we share the same name. I work for the Center for Teaching Excellence and Innovation, and my role is to provide faculty training and support, especially in terms of teaching and technology. Rush University itself is the academic arm of Rush University Medical Center located in Chicago. And central to Rush's mission is the practitioner-teacher model. I'm telling you this because as I was leading a team of a few other designers in developing AI educational resources, it was really important to take into consideration that the faculty at my institution are extraordinarily busy, like many faculty, like all of us are really, but our faculty, they are practitioners in the field, they conduct research, and they also teach. So that the knowledge of their kind of multiple roles really informed how I thought about an approach to AI literacy that for me I wanted it to have some flexibility. Okay, so now that the introductions are out of the way, I just want to give you a little preview of what's to come for the remainder of this presentation. First of all, I will talk a little bit about the motivation for developing the AI literacy educational resource that I'll talk about today. I'll take some time to talk about a specific aspect of our AI literacy framework. I'll then discuss a little bit the dissemination of this framework in the form of a learning module. And finally, I'll wrap up by talking about the impact and reach of this model. But before I delve into motivations, I would like to take one more opportunity for audience interaction. That's really key for me, and it's something that I enjoy. So let me see if I can get the next poll ready. Taking just a moment to load. I'll also put the link to this poll in the chat. And let's make sure that it's activated. There we go. All right, so it's activated. So I'm just curious to hear from you who are attending today, if you or your organization has AI literacy guidelines or policies in place. All right, we'll give it about 15 more seconds, but this is a great snapshot of just what's happening across the institutions represented in this session today. It's interesting to know that at least, yeah, it looks like the majority of you do currently not have AI literacy guidelines in place. So hopefully today's session will be beneficial for you. Let's move back to the presentation. Okay, so it's with those same issues that, and I should step back a bit. In early 2023, my team and I, like many teams or educators, librarians, all of you on this call probably, were sort of pondering how to respond with this new set of challenges that came about with the advent of tools like ChatGPT. And at that time, I was doing a lot of reading about AI, experimenting with different tools. And of course, there really weren't any policies or guidelines in place, as far as I'm aware, at most institutions, and there certainly weren't any in place at my institution. So with that in mind, I decided that it would be absolutely essential moving forward with any sort of AI strategic plan that our institution needed to develop an AI literacy framework and resources, and that this would be crucial for this. Some of the sort of sub goals in developing AI literacy frameworks and resources were addressing things like faculty overwhelm. And through a series of open forums and conversations with faculty, we came to realize that many were in fact overwhelmed by this new prospect. And hand in hand with that, we also wanted to start helping faculty, and by faculty, or through faculty, also students, to start building AI readiness. Now, in terms of trying to land upon a definition of AI literacy while serving a diverse audience comprised of both faculty and students, we looked at a lot of literature, and there is a lot of wonderful scholarship on the topic, but we ended up trying to select a definition that we felt wasn't overly prescriptive. And so we decided to go with this definition by Mahabali, which states AI literacy is a competency that is beyond the basic skill of how to use something, but beyond that, the capacity to know when, where, and why to use it for a purpose, and importantly, when not to use it. Now, in addition, or in some ways, even more importantly than Mahabali's excellent definition, and she has wonderful scholarship and public scholarship on AI literacy. Some of the most formative work for me in thinking about a framework was this concept of entangled pedagogy, which comes from the work of Tim Fons, and the reference is on the next slide. So just a little bit of background about Fons' work. And I'll note that Fons didn't explicitly talk about AI in his article, but nevertheless, I thought it would be a really useful way for thinking about AI as a paradigm-shifting technology, especially with regard to education. At the heart of his argument is the idea that we reside in a post-digital era. And in this post-digital era, he argues that teaching and technology are inextricably intertwined. And so because of that, to prioritize one over the other creates a false dichotomy. He also adds that it's illusory to think that technology and pedagogy are independent factors. So given all that, and obviously heartily agreeing with Fons, I'd argue that given our reliance on technology in teaching, leaning on tools like learning management systems, word processors, virtual conferences, and more, I suggest that maybe AI is just the next step in these technological advancements. So as such, we need to think of them as part of our teaching rather than being separate, something separate. All right, and I'd like to explore this idea a little bit more by turning to a mind map that I created with ChatGPT that's based on some key aspects of Fons' notion of entangled pedagogy. And I'll orient you a little bit to this map. I admit that it's potentially a little overwhelming, especially if you're not acquainted with Fons' work. The gray labels represent foundational concepts of entangled pedagogy. So we might think of them as the what of entangled pedagogy. Things like the fact that purpose, context, and values are emphasized over technology, but at the same time, technology is multiple, contextual, and relational. We also see that it prioritizes teacher-student collaborations. This is one of my favorite parts of it, that it also embraces uncertainty, imperfection, openness, and honesty. And finally, there's the idea that knowledge is distributed, responsive, and ethical. The black labels indicate the practical implications or manifestations of these concepts in educational practice. So I like to think of them as the how or why of entangled pedagogy. So again, we see things like the prioritization of teacher-student interactions, co-designing of projects, accepting that mistakes are part of the learning process, and that learning can be adaptable to changing needs. So as such, I suggest that entangled pedagogy provides a useful framework for thinking about integrating AI in education, and specifically AI literacy. Through the promotion of a learning environment where teachers, students, and technology engage in mutual, meaningful, and ongoing interaction. I'm also going to add one more thing that is not really explicit in this mind map, but it's something that stands out to me, is that I think such an approach also helps foster compassion, on the one hand, for students who are learning to work with a new technology. And this is perhaps in opposition to setting up an adversarial stance with students, and also helps maybe allow educators to have compassion for themselves, to experiment with different technologies and not feeling like you need to be an expert before using a certain technology in the classroom. Okay. Just making sure there's nothing in the chat that needs to be addressed at this moment. All right. We see these elements balanced in or incorporated in other aspects of the AI literacy framework that my team and I developed. On the one hand, leaning heavily into the work of Ethan Mollick throughout, and trying to instill in faculty this idea that there's really only one bad way to react to AI, and that's to pretend it doesn't change anything. But there isn't one single right way to adopt AI literacy. There's the way that works for you within the parameters of your situation. And I really like that second quote again in terms of thinking about incorporating compassion into the framework of AI literacy. And again, Mahabali writes much more extensively on that. You might follow up on that if you're interested. All right, so what I'd like to do now is shift our focus from those overarching concepts of compassion and tangled pedagogy to think more specifically about the competencies that form the backbone of our AI literacy framework. And here we relied very heavily on the work of Brent Anders. The reference is at the bottom of the slide. And it's a wonderful resource for getting started if you haven't had a chance yet to explore AI literacy. So Anders uses these 4 components to structure his conversation about AI literacy. And so we took these elements or components and we sort of put our own spin on them. And I'll start with awareness. That's sort of our foundational level within the student-facing educational resource. And within awareness, we want students to recognize the pervasiveness of AI tools. We want them to be able to differentiate the capabilities of generative AI from other types of AI, and also to be able to recognize its limitations. At the next level is capability. So helping students, starting to give them the skills to develop and effectively use and interact with AI tools. And this, of course, includes things like prompt engineering and model selection. The third component is knowledge. So building a foundational understanding of AI technologies and understanding concerns surrounding data privacy. And then finally, and of course, very importantly, is critical thinking, which entails cultivating the ability to critically evaluate AI-generated output, assess its accuracy and reliability, to think about the implications and make informed decisions about AI use. Now, bringing all of these elements together, this different scholarship on AI literacy, works by Mahabali, Tim Fons, Brent Anders, and more. What we did is created these, I guess I've labeled them pillars of AI literacy that focus on the core principles you see on the screen here. So ethics, thinking about key concerns related to AI tools and systems like bias, susceptibility to error, as well as human environmental costs. Readiness. And I feel like readiness is really a key component, especially with regard to the audience that I support. So developing an open mindset with regard to AI, in addition to starting to develop skills to use it efficiently. Safety is also something that we really emphasize. So being attuned to issues such as privacy and intellectual property. So how is what you enter into an AI tool or system used, and how could that adversely impact you? And finally, responsibility. So understanding how to use AI thoughtfully and in an accountable way. All right, I'm going to change gears a little bit and talk about the impact of this educational resource, first internally, and then talk about some of the external impacts. All right, so it's been about 9 months since this educational framework has been available at my institution. And very sadly, we don't have measurable data to observe its impacts, which breaks my heart a little bit. But what we have been able to do is we've had a number of conversations with faculty who have used this educational resource and this framework. And what we found is that those who are using it seem to have a higher level of AI readiness, and they also seem to be having more class discussions about AI. Just anecdotally, again, unfortunately, we couldn't do a full-on survey of users, but those who have adopted this literacy module as part of their course have told us that they frequently have had conversations, that they've addressed students' fears and concerns about AI. And as I believe Jason Gulia said in the keynote, there are a lot of students who are really fearful about using AI. They're not all trying to cheat. We've also had some remarkable instances in which, leaning into this framework, there are faculty who have had conversations with students about AI capabilities and have actually changed assessments mid-semester, realizing that previous assessments really don't work in an AI era. I think also leading into that idea that it's okay not to be expert when using AI, even if you're the instructor. A lot of faculty have shared with us that they have modeled their own nascent use of AI for students to show them that it's okay to engage in this learning process. Now, while my team had hoped that the framework and resources would have a positive impact within our university community, we were really pleasantly surprised to discover that it could help educators outside of the university as well. And I need to backtrack just a moment to explain that. So as we were developing these resources in early summer of 2023, I was in a lot of conversations, meetings with different stakeholders throughout from a variety of universities and institutions. And it became apparent that there really weren't many resources like this at that time. So I proposed to my team that maybe we should give it a shot and see if other educators or institutions might be able to benefit from this resource as well. And so what we did was to make the resource available through a Creative Commons license, which allows for flexible use, adaptation, as long as there's attribution. And 9 months later, now the educational resource has been requested by 329 institutions. And according to the self-reported data that we've collected, it's being used by over 90,000 faculty and nearly 350,000 students, which is really pretty exciting. We've also received a great deal of positive community feedback regarding its usefulness for individual stakeholders and also broader impacts in terms of the educational community. I'll say just a few things about where the module is headed now. As I mentioned, we were developing the module last summer and launched it in August of 2023. So we're currently in one of our continuous improvement cycles. We aim to update it on a quarterly basis to maintain its relevance. Right now, we're in sort of a more intensive revision process to make sure that we're incorporating some of the other wonderful resources that have come out in terms of AI literacy. And with that in mind, I welcome you to be part of this conversation that I started with my small team at Rush and sort of expanded throughout a variety of institutions. So I welcome you to explore the AI literacy resource. As I mentioned, it's open source educational resource. It's that way it's essentially designed to be adapted. Using the QR code on the left, you can access the form to request it. All you need to do is provide us with a little bit of information that helps us evaluate its reach and impact, and also helps determine some of our allocation of resources with regard to AI. And I do want to say I don't think my approach to AI or my team's approach to AI is the approach, as was mentioned in the keynote, that there really are no best practices yet. Everything around AI is still evolving. And so I would like to highlight some other wonderful resources that I've seen lately. This is an article that came out on Tuesday, which really provided a wonderful and comprehensive overview of some different AI literacy resources. I'll also copy the link and put it in the chat. And I just want to thank everyone for joining me today and being part of this ongoing conversation. There's about 5 minutes left, so I'm happy to answer questions, but I also know that people might want a minute or two more before they transition to their next talk.